You've probably heard about it. Misdesigned, underpowered, totally broken. And honestly, yeah, it has issues. But that doesn't mean we can't turn it into an overpowered, raging inferno that trivializes a big chunk of the current game. If you can survive the mind-numbing grind to unlock it. Let's dive in. The first ability is Ember. Calling this your most powerful ability would be an absolute understatement. It pretty much defines how you play this pact effectively. What it does is you activate a buff that lasts a few seconds, scaling with spirit. During that time, anytime you take damage, you trigger a flame wave around you. It's a short radius burst, it doesn't scale with grace, it deals a bit of damage and applies a burning condition. At max level, the burn seems to apply instantly to most enemies. So what does the burn actually do? First, it deals minor damage over time. And while they are burning, enemies take more damage from anything that's normally reduced by armor. I can't say for certain whether the burn steel buff reduces that armor by a flat value or a percentage, but it applies to every burn effect from this pact. So even if the damage itself isn't huge, it makes enemies a lot more vulnerable to rapid hitting weapons or abilities, which suffer most from flat armor scaling. That will matter when we talk about the next ability. But the most important part, it completely disables enemies. They stop moving, stop attacking and just stand there, locked in their little "oh no, I'm burning" dance. So for now, just remember, this burn completely disables and debuffs them. This is one of the few crowd control effects in the game that lasts for a meaningful amount of time and lets you keep attacking without breaking the crowd control. As long as Ember is still running, the effect can be reapplied instantly after it ends. It's a really powerful package. But there are also downsides. First, it comes with some weird scaling quirks. Let's start with the cooldown. It doesn't begin cooling down right after use. Instead, it starts on a delay. And the more spirit you have, the longer that delay becomes. And if you have leveled the Akin node, it gets even worse. This delay also means you're locked out of cooldown reduction from smites, which will matter when we get to builds later. In addition to that, it has a health cost, since you have to get hit to trigger it. And it doesn't work on everything. Mockeries, oozes and the corrupted stack, for example, are immune to the disabling effect. But a lot of bosses actually stop swinging when it hits, so overall it's really strong. But let's quickly run through the other abilities and then we will piece it all together in the build section. The next ability is Ignus Wroth. On its own, it's not that great, but luckily, since we just covered the armor reduction, this is exactly how to save it. It creates a ground cast eruption that emits 18 fissures over a couple of seconds. The closer enemies are to the cast point, the more likely they are to get hit. It doesn't scale with any virtue, and it doesn't even apply any burn effects. It can cause a bit of micro stagger, but not enough to reliably interrupt enemy actions. But, as you might have guessed, the issue is simple. This damage doesn't ignore armor. Against late game Ode, you will be lucky to see 1 to 3 damage per hit. But this is where Ember comes in. When enemies are burning, their armor drops. And additionally, they stop moving. That means you can drop Ignus Wroth right on top of a crowd enjoying their "oh no, I'm burning" dance and actually get many of the hits to connect, with each one dealing +10 damage thanks to the armor debuff. Enough to make it worthwhile, if cast right into a crowd. It's also one of the few tools you have against mockeries, since they're immune to Burn's disabling effect but have no armor at all. So even without synergies, Ignus Wroth can still land for full damage. And hey, that's better than nothing. Even better implemented is the next ability. Inferno. And this one is really weird, put slightly. You throw a quick straight line burning blade in the direction of your crosshair. It plows through multiple enemies, deals a bit of damage, applies a short burn effect, knocks them back, sure, but here's the fun part. Sometimes, and I mean sometimes, this thing will just one-shot enemies. I've seen it taking out multiple enemies, including heavies, in one go. It seems to trigger on every enemy hit in the pass when it procs, letting you wipe out 2, 3 or even more targets in a row if you line them up and get lucky. I have no idea what causes this. No stat I have tested seems to influence it. So far, it just randomly happens. Frankly, it's kind of hilarious. Well, aside from that, The burn is short and weak. Yes, it still applies the armor debuff, but it's so brief you would only really benefit with ranged follow-up because the knockback pushes enemies out of melee. And when Ember relies on staying close to trigger flame waves, that knockback just gets in the way. So really, the only moment it's ever useful is at the start of a fight or when Ember is on cooldown. All in all, well, let's not waste more time on this one and move on to a passive that at least is halfway functional. This is Smolder. Once you are in combat, your focused enemy will start emitting glowing sparks, one burst every second. After 5 sparks, the next one upgrades the damage, and it keeps ramping every 5 ticks. This continues until the enemy dies or the effect resets. Once a single damage tick reaches 8 or more, you trigger a burst, but only once. The enemy ignites and emits a flame wave just like Ember, causing 100 damage to itself and nearby enemies. That wave applies its own burn, which then makes enemies perform the "oh no, I'm burning" dance. The real problem is Smolder is tied to soft lock, and you don't have full control over what you are locked onto. In multi-target fights, it's common for the counter to reset, sometimes picking up again, sometimes not. Also, some high-level enemies seem to resist the burst effect. They will take damage but won't ignite. Others, like the Stack, seem almost completely immune. Still, despite all of that, Smolder is one of the better effects in this pact outside of Ember. If it works, it gives you consistent bonus damage and crowd control, and that's more than most of this kit can say. Abilities are only half the story. To really make Mora's hand work, you will need the right build behind it, so let's break that down. The core of the setup comes down to virtue allocation and skill distribution, so we will start there. And to be blunt, the only part of this entire pact that really matters is Ember. So we are going to build around maximizing its uptime. To do that, you will want to invest fully into Spirit and avoid a kin entirely. That combination gives you a long Ember duration and minimizes the cooldown delay that prevents smite-based cooldown reduction. The second piece is survivability, because the only real cost of permanent crowd control is a chunk of your health bar every time it fires. Therefore, we want that to regenerate as fast as possible. So when it comes to skills, prioritize Sympathy for smite healing, Everbound, the keynote that boosts healing from Sympathy, and then max out Smolder and invest in Spirit enhancements. Smolder doesn't do much at low ranks, but once maxed, it becomes somewhat consistent. To make this build work, you need to maximize smite procs while staying in melee range. That means you will need fly blades with the orbit blades move, which is borderline broken for smite generation, and basically the key reason this build functions as well as it does. I recommend Prelude, the courage aligned version, for its higher smite chance. And one quick tip: don't charge the orbit blade throw. If you hold it too long, the circle gets so wide it won't hit anything in melee anymore. Just a quick tap is all you need. Better yet, don't even invest in the perfect throw node. That way you can't accidentally time it right and miss everything. And for your main hand, use a spirit-attuned melee weapon with a fast hit rate and a high smite chance. I went with Royal Tines. Also, don't forget the smite boosting mode. That's basically the foundation. Now let's look at how to actually use it. The good news, it's simple. Start every fight by casting Ember before making contact. Then activate your orbit blades. Run straight into the densest enemy cluster or charge a ranged enemy to drag everyone with you, and then just get hit. That first hit will trigger Ember's flame wave and crowd control everything around you. The orbit blades have a ridiculously high chance to trigger multiple smites per fight, especially if you got the smite chance mode equipped. It's pretty rare that you will need to fall back on potions. If the enemies are burning, just drop Ignus Wroth on them and finish them off. If you're aboard, you can punch them with your Royal Tines, make things go a little faster against heavies. When Ember runs out, just back off a bit. Use your Flying Sword and Throwing Blades to stall for cooldowns, and then jump back in as soon as it's ready. Of course, all of this has a few downsides. While this works well on most enemies, it completely falls apart against things like the Stack or Mockeries, who are immune to the burn CC and don't give you any healing back. And in boss fights, with no adds to smite-heal from, you're just standing there hoping your Ember is enough. The problem is, aside from Ember, the rest of this kit barely functions. Most of it is either non-scaling, non-synergistic, or just outright non-functional. So yes, this pact is very broken. But it's broken in that special way where one clunky but powerful ability somehow carries the whole experience. And yeah, I know, I kept one passive for last. That was intentional. I didn't want to drag the almost working parts of this kit into the dirt by bringing up this, let's call it, functionally slightly situational passive too early. So let's wrap this up with that final one. The last passive is Hungry Flame. If you are burning, you deal more damage. Right now, that mostly just means standing in open fire, where the flames can actually hurt you. Standing in it for a few seconds and you will get a short burst of extra attack power. So yeah, fight on top of a torch if you feel like it, or just skip it, your choice. And if you enjoyed breaking down this awkward but powerful pact, drop a like, maybe a sub, and we will dig into the next questionable masterpiece together in the next Pact Spotlight.